If you would, please take your seats. Welcome to this afternoon's work session. First order of business would be to see if any commissioner would like to take any of the agenda items for next week for discussion.
Chairman, I don't have an agenda item, but I would like to speak to the, I believe Central Services has like a survey or something, a vendor rating. And I was wondering if, you know, because I have a deep concern regarding a vendor. And I just want to know when and where can we make those concerns known?
Yes, ma'am. So for any contract that we have within Central Services, we do the VPE, which is our vendor performance evaluation. We do that quarterly. But obviously, we have the information on the buzz. So if something does occur, you can certainly fill out the form and send it over to us. What we do is that we'll contact the vendor of the concern, and then once it comes back, we will move forward either with if the vendor has agreed to rectify the situation or if we need to have a meeting with the vendor. So if you have some concerns, I can certainly get that form over to you as soon as possible.
You all.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any others? All right, hearing none, we will start our work session presentation and discussion items. First up will be MARTA first quarterly briefing. How you doing, Mr. Greenwood? I'm being facetious.
Great apologies. Mr. Greenwood had a family emergency very, very recently, so we had a little bit of a change of plans. So Ms. Rocha and I are going to be pitching in today and hopefully give as much information as you may need. So first of all, thank you for giving us the time today to give you the update. And I believe we have our board chair, Catherine Powers, and Valencia Williamson tuning in online. Our cover picture for the day is going to be from the Clayton Transit Hub when we had the carolers there last, now 2 months ago for the holiday season. So we'll get on into the operations update. First up, we have ridership. We did have a little bit of a dip in the winter months, and that's pretty annual occurrence. This is due to kids being out of school, some traveling, and other things going on. We typically see another uptick right around warmer weather, and we do expect that to happen again, and ridership to continue to increase as it has since the pandemic. There we go. We're also wrapping up our 5-year amenities program. And we're going to be delivering all 67 left in that FY24. We're well on our way with the 30 installed and 12 under construction, 9 in permitting, and 16 in design. And happy to take any questions on that. Here's an example that we've done in this last quarter. This particular one is on State Route 42 and Anvil Block Road. We do have 19 boardings during the weekdays and serves this industrial and commercial business area. I also wanted to say, I believe Commissioner Anderson, you may have received a concern about from a constituent on a need for the 32 195 routes on this road as well, near the Walmart Shopping Center. There are 2 amenities in that area, but we're going to put another one that should be done by the end of this month.
Oh, thank you.
We do have 2 bus service modifications that we are putting before you. The first one, well, first of all, both of them are not very big, but big enough to definitely trigger the formal process. And so we did notify Lake City, Forest Park, and all of you about these changes. We did have an open house as well. The first one is the 192, and we're proposing to modify the routing to shift from Old Dixie Highway to Old Dixie Road between CW Grant Parkway and Central Avenue. It's about a 1-mile stretch. This change is now possible due to the completion of the underpass near the Norfolk, or below the Norfolk Southern Rail. It'll connect Old Dixie Road and allows us to address the requests that we've received from the Home Lodge Extending Stay, as well as other employers at the South Point Industrial Park. 192 will be shifting east. However, the 193 will continue to provide service along those affected portions of Old Dixie Highway. The next change is 195 Forest Parkway. This would allow us to establish MARTA's first fixed route bus service to Gillum Logistics Center. As you can see in the maps, we'd be extending the loop at the end of the route. We can operate through the Gillum Logistics Center along Metcalf Road and Anvil Block Road, serving a growing concentration of employers in the property. This change was a request by the Gillum tenants, Clayton Department of Economic Development, City of Forest Park, and the Board of Commissioners. While this one allows us to initiate service to Gillum Logistics Center, there is a trade-off. A relatively small number of passengers along the affected segment of the Forest Parkway south of the Gillum Logistics Center could see longer travel times as they may need to ride through the loop to reach their destination. Here's some snapshots from the public hearing that held on February 8th at the Forest Park Community Center. We will also be conducting the federally required Title VI service equity analysis to evaluate the equity impacts of these changes. We'll review public comments received in the hearings and through other channels, and then we'll return to you to request the approval to implement these changes, which would take place in April 2024. And just to summarize the impacts of this, there are no increase to the number of weekly trips, operating cost, peak vehicles required, or staff changes. So as indicated, there are relatively small number of current passengers affected on each route. Next up, I'll hand it over to Ms. Rocha for capital projects.
Thank you. I'm Carrie Rocha. I'm the Chief Capital Officer for MARTA, and I'm pleased to present some updates on the capital expansion. First up is the Justice Center Transit Hub. So the final design of the Justice Center Transit Hub is on track with a complete package for bid to be finalized this spring. Discussions on the safety needs between the hub and the jail are ongoing with the county right now. The MARTA team is looking at contracting options to potentially release additional fencing work as an early release package. And discussions with the City of Jonesboro and Clayton County are underway to help determine specific permit requirements. Went too far. There we go. With regard to the multipurpose operations and maintenance facility, we made good progress on plans for the facility. The demolition bid package has been prepared and we're under final review internally, and that will be released soon, an invitation for bid. We're planning a groundbreaking for late spring with the demolition construction anticipated to start this summer. And the project team is currently working with Forest Park on a variance for the site layout of the buildings. The first permits we need to obtain are for demolition of the current warehouse buildings, and we'll complete a courtesy review of the demolition plans with Forest Park in the next month. The planned completion of the entire O&M facility is August of 2029, and we're looking to potentially start operations, though, as early as August of 2028 in the first phase. With respect to the MARTA Rapid South Lake BRT project, this fall we received final recommendations from the Airport Connection Study team that was conducted to review the feasibility of a more direct connection to the airport, and that is in lieu of the originally planned connection at College Park. This connection would provide both direct access to the heavy rail as well as to the airport at the domestic terminal side. And part of the impetus behind this was to improve the rating for the project for the Capital Investment Grant Program. This makes the project more competitive against other projects across the country for the federal funding that we need. With this direct connection to the airport, the project's rating improves, and we get, due to the direct access to jobs, reduced travel time, and forecast ridership increase. With this positive support from Clayton County, and thank you very much, and the City of Atlanta's Department of Aviation and GDOT, the study team has recommended this alternative that includes dedicated service by means of an elevated structure. A competitive solicitation to hire a final design consultant is on track and will be released very soon. And then the next step is to solicit public input for the proposed new terminus, and we're preparing for public meetings in early March. And lastly, the SR 54 BRT update, and not much has changed since our last report on this one back in December, but the Tier 1 screening of alternatives is underway with non-alternatives. We've also looked to confirm the alignments and station locations. We've transitioned a final design consultant as we've changed over our general planning contract, and so work on the planning side of this project continues.
As we are celebrating Black History Month, we won't just be celebrating this month, we'll be celebrating throughout the year. MARTA will have Atlanta civil rights leaders celebrating the civil rights leaders and their role in our history with specially designed buses. These icons include a list of folks here: Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King, Juanita Jones Abernathy, Congressman John Lewis, Reverend Dr. Joseph E. Lowery, Evelyn Gibson Lowery, and Ambassador Andrew Young. We also have officially unveiled the Dr. King and Coretta Scott King bus at the King Center on January 4th in advance of the King holiday observance. We'll also recognize barrier-breaking Black employees throughout the month of February with custom breeze cards, posters of the bus at the shelters and rail stations, and other MARTA social media accounts. Additionally, on social media, you'll see some campaign covering MARTA history, facts about MARTA's first Black employees, and the history of Atlanta's role as the cradle of the civil rights movement. You can also visit Spotify for a curated playlist featuring Black Atlanta artists as well as Black artists from the 1950s and 60s at the height of the civil rights era. Additional information can be found on MARTA's Black History page 2024. Oh, one I know. So I'd like to highlight some events that's happening down under the Gold Dome. We have been engaging our elected leaders quite a bit. This started off with a BRT education simulation as we bussed the state leaders and attendees and other VIPs from the Capitol to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium for Eggs and Issues, if you were there for that. And we had some dedicated lane, we had some police escorts to really show what BRT will look like, and we're very excited for that throughout the system, especially the South Lake BRT route here. We also were able to have the opportunity to speak in front of the Clayton Chamber leaders at the Gold Dome earlier this week or just last week, and gave them a little bit of an update about MARTA and some of the projects going on here. We wrap up the year with our Gooder report and the events that we have done with them. We're proud to have extended the reach of the MARTA Fresh Market program beyond the rail stations with the partnership of Gooder at 7 free mobile market pop-ups. In total, 700 households were served with 120 eligible Clayton seniors and riders with disabilities were able to receive a free or reduced fare Breeze card. We'd like to thank the county for using several of the facilities for these events, including library headquarters, senior centers, and the Terrace Stadium. We received a lot of great feedback from our participants about the quality of the selection of the food and the participants shopped for at the pop-ups. We are going to renew this contract in 2024 for another 7 events, so we'll be in touch about those plans. And we also have brought a copy of that report and attached it with the copy of this presentation today. That concludes, and we'll take any questions you might have.
All right, any board member have any questions?
Yes, just
Commissioner
one
Davis.
request. Thank you. Can we get an updated copy, going back to the amenities list?
Yes,
For all the amenities, can we just get an updated copy on what's in progress and what's to come?
you got it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hamburg.
Yes, those specialty buses, is it just the one with Dr. King and Mrs. King, or you have others?
Yeah, so the specialty buses will include the list of folks that I named. So you have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King, Juanita Jones Abernathy, Congressman John Lewis, Reverend Dr. Joseph E. Lowery, Evelyn Gibson Lowery, and Ambassador Andrew Young are going to be on at some point in the year.
Do they come to Clayton County?
I believe that they may in that service area, but I'll definitely make sure. We'll check into that. I believe we rotate them out throughout the whole jurisdictions. And like I said, they will be rolling out an entire of 2024, not just this month. So you'll see them.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Franklin.
Good to see you, Jennifer.
Thanks.
Great presentation. Want to ask you real quick, where does the South Lake BRT, and there was one more, the 54, we don't have a copy of the one for 54, by the way. Where does it line up with the prioritization list with the ATL? Because I know you were stating that you're trying to get additional federal funding for it, so where does that line up on that prioritization list?
I believe the original LPA is probably on the tip, but I don't know if the change would be. I think that might be triggered after you guys
Okay.
approve, we approve, and
And then
then
it goes
redo the tip at the board, the ATL board level.
Wonderful. The reason I asked that is so everyone that's here would understand Georgia has been the last to receive federal funding for transportation for so many years, only because, as our Congress representatives have stated, that there was no alignment of projects coming forth collectively from the state. And so because of what the ATL has done when you were there even, it has helped us to be able to have a clear directive of what's important to us, not only in the state, but us locally. So now coming on back home, I just want to know how soon we can get it on, and I don't know their schedule anymore, but also to see where it's rated and how does it rate in terms of the leveraging, how important it is versus the cost, because then that goes before our state legislature and then, of course, to the federal government, which all affects the amount of money we receive.
Yes, ma'am. So again, I'll get the details on that, but if I'm not mistaken, I think that we all need to, Marta,
You're right.
Clayton need to approve first. And so if their next board meeting's in March and we get all of this done in March, we could probably be on a TIP amendment May?
That's
March, April, May?
perfect. So staff, you all are aware of the
Perhaps.
chart.
Don't
Well,
quote me.
We have to vote, but just so that it could get on the agenda. I know you and Michael and everybody has it. Thank you.
Any other
And Ben,
questions?
thank you.
Sorry, were you finished?
Yes, sir, that was pretty much it.
Anybody else have any other questions?
Yes, I want to first of all,
Commissioner Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I want to first of all to say thank you for taking care of Anvil Block Road. You talked about longer travel time in the Forest Park, on the Forest Parkway 195 route corridor going into Gillum. How long, with the loop being there, how long do you think it'll take as far as, I guess, will it be like a more of a 5-minute, more 10-minute delay versus
I would
what?
estimate that just because of the route looking at it, but I am probably not the best person to give you that
Okay,
answer, so I will get that back to you
okay,
for sure.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chair, I have one more.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
It's a quick question. Really love the 700 households that are served and then the discount cards. What I'd like to see us do, though, is if we could partner with our judges program, such as they have a graduating class right now for anger management and all of that, all the different specialty tracks through the court system. I know that oftentimes the coordinator would contact us and ask, do we have anything we could support those individuals with? So this definitely would be of help. And usually it's only about 4 to 5 people that are completing those alternative court programs, but that is one of the asks. They've asked about, breezeway cards so that it can help them get their life back on track. One of them I know is Judge Mason, and I think Judge Rooks. They all have accountability courts. That was the word I was looking for.
Good recommendation. We'll take that note back.
Thank you.
And take care of that.
All right, well, I'm really excited about the progress we're making, especially here in Clayton County. I know it's a whole system, but just to see things moving in Clayton County, especially with the operations center and the amenities. So kudos to y'all. Keep on doing what
Thank
you're
you.
doing.
We
But
do-
the best part is y'all have always been responsive and actually return phone calls. So I appreciate that.
We will continue to try to do that as well. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you. Thank you for your presentation. All right, next up will be the reorganization of Central Services, Director Rogers and DCOO Murkison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Each of you should have gotten a binder of information in your mailboxes that goes into further detail about what we're going to discuss tonight. We're not going to go through the binder. We will be brief in our presentation, but we felt now that we're in the budget process that we bring forth a topic that affects just about everything this county does from a procurement standpoint, from the day-to-day operation of buying different widgets and gadgets and doodads that we need to do our job, to contract procurement, contract management, so on and so forth. And I wanted to start by just giving a kudos to Director Rogers, who reached out and asked that I do a deep dive into her organization and help her come up with some options and ways to fix what is a burgeoning issue within our operations. And it's just the simple fact of how we can move contracts faster, bids, solicitations, in the management of those. I think I fielded concerns from all of you at some point in my short tenure as DCOO, and I know that Ms. Rogers does on a daily basis about, and it typically gets framed as it's hung up in Central. We hear that a lot. But if you attended the training that we did with the department heads from Greg Gray, he brought forth a central concept that we're going to use tonight. And his concept was when problems come up, don't run from them. You need to hug it and then pivot. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to hug it, but we're going to pivot to some solutions that we've brought forth. And there are some solutions that reside in our current code that we can just simply implement to make the lives of our directors easy and the lives of Central easy. But I think this presentation will be an eye-opener to the board as to some of the challenges that Director Rogers faces and why we have some of the challenges that we do. And while we're not asking you to approve what's in the binders tonight, we are just simply asking that this be considered a board priority moving into the FYE 25 budget so that we can streamline our operations and get things moving a little bit quicker. So with that, Director Rogers, ma'am, the floor is yours.
Chief, is this what's being presented in the budget, right, in the 20?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
correct.
Great.
All right, good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners again. So as DCO stated, part of my commitment to you all, first of all, for empowering me to run your procurement department is process improvement. I've been in this position for a little over 6 years. Yes, time flies while we're having fun, Commissioner. So part of the challenge is we do process improvement on a small level. But as we go through the last current years, part of this is directly related to services for the county increasing. We have more citizens, we need more services, we need more widgets, we need more goods, we need more commodities. So how do we keep up with all of that? Looking over everything the last couple of years, I realize we're at the space where simply changing the form will no longer work. We need to have a major overall haul in central services for the procurement. So I want to kind of walk through that process, bring up some things that I think will be some questions we've had about previous contracts, as well as how do we move forward with the challenges that most departments have, but certainly unique to central services. I will start by saying someone's lack of planning is not our emergency, but it does become our emergency. So a lot of times we are in the reactive mode. So tonight I want to talk about how we can be proactive as a team, as a county. So central services, I think you all are aware of what we do, but I do want to touch a little bit on some of the main things that we're charged by you all. First of all, we do centralized purchasing and warehousing for all county commodities, services, and equipment. The centralized part simply means that any services or goods that's being purchased or equipment for the county should come through central services. There are 1 or 2 exceptions, and I will touch on that as we go further into the presentation, but that's what that centralized purchasing meaning, that everything per the code should come through central services. We also dispose of the county's property through our surplus process. We manage, administrate, and enforce our small local business program and our other vendor programs. We also mitigate the county's property and contract risk through our risk management department. Most importantly, compliance. Compliance in what we have to do as professional procurement. We have to make sure we're in compliance with not only the county's purchasing code, but also GDOT regulations. When that money comes down for GDOT, only certain people can actually process those bids. You have to be certified through GDOT to actually process a bid for GDOT. Also, federal regulations. We look at how is that project funded. If it's a grant fund, it may have things that we have to do as well. So that's just kind of an overview of our day-to-day and what we do in central services. So, favorite slide, challenges. So, I wanted to kind of look at the bigger picture. Contract management, I want to come back to that. I want to spend some time on that with you all for a moment. But also, we've already spoke about the needs for the county as far as our growth is concerned. Retaining and recruiting new personnel. I think everybody is challenged with that, but we're kind of unique sometimes in that we use the word poached. If you all did see that, we have lost a lot of staff to other entities. We do training, have a great training program. We also promote certification. As soon as we get them to that spot, they leave and they can go make $20,000 starting off with another entity. Obviously, competition in the market. So back to contract management. I know there's a lot of documentation, and we're not going to go through the binder, I promise, but there is something I want you to take a look at. If you look at your binders on the left-hand side, there is a sheet that kind of gives a little information on contract management and administration. You all are very familiar with the left side of the house. That is the pre-award. That is what we do. We solicit bids, we get that bid to you, we get it awarded, we do a kickoff. The right side of the house is where we need to have shored up. That is your contract management part. That is your post-award. Once we do a kickoff, we turn that contract over to the user department. We come back in when it's time for renewal. We may come in as we do our quarterly reports, but the month part, where there's one centralized person looking at that contract, looking at the risk involved, looking at the schedule, working with the subject matter expert, working with the vendor, working with finance, that does not exist in the county. So that's where we need to shore that up. So major part of the reorg, along with the wages, is establishing that post side of the house, having people dedicated to that. I do want to go back for a moment, if I may. When I started back with the county in 2006, that contract section had a contracts manager that was actually over the house, so to speak. Front side, the back, both sides of the house. As we implemented in 2012, as we implemented the small business program, we took that contract management position and we put it into the compliance part for SLBE. It was never replaced. So now you have a side of the house that is dedicated to the left side, which is solicitation, which is great. I feel like our team does a great job making sure that we're in compliance with everything. But then the challenges that we see with our contracts come up on the right side. If you will look, those are the change orders, those are schedules, those are any kind of vendor performance. All of that is on that right side of that sheet. And that's where we have lacking in a need for the county. So, we can, if you all have any questions, if you want me to pause now. Yes, ma'am.
I don't have any questions,
Yes,
but I
ma'am.
just want to let the board know those were some of the concerns that I had, and that's why I bought this for, especially with us training so many people and losing them to places like the school district and things of that nature. So that's why I bought this for, so you all could explain and we could see what was going on.
And we appreciate that, Commissioner, allowing us a chance to kind of do a deeper dive. I know we are limited with time, but to allow us a chance to do a deeper dive on that.
Ms. Rogers,
Go ahead, Commissioner.
something you mentioned early on about getting employees and training them,
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
and then they go other places.
Yes,
Can we, have an agreement, a contract, and say, once you get the training or whatever, then you are obligated to stay X number of years or something?
Yes, ma'am. So what we work to do with Ms. Rogers, because the problems that she's facing is not unlike what we dealt with in public safety. It's not unlike what we dealt with in fleet last budget year when we set up the tiers for the fleet mechanics. What we've done in Ms. Rogers' shop is also set up tier levels to where as employees gain certifications, they can be compensated for those certifications. Along with that comes that employment agreement, the same thing that we do with certifications in fire, we do it with the educational incentive. Once we compensate you, then you sign an agreement that says you'll work for us at least X number of years. If not, then we get a prorated version of what our expenses were back, right? So that kind of helps protect kind of the county's investment. The issue we're struggling with, it's identical to public safety and what we dealt with fleet. You cannot get a job in procurement with our sister municipalities unless you're certified. We're the exception to that. So what happens? They come here to get certified, and then they leave to go work for other procurement agencies where they can make $25,000 to $30,000 more a year.
Is
So,
that part of our fix?
ma'am,
Is that a part of our fix?
it is a part of our fix and a large part of the dollar figure that's attached to that binder.
Okay.
But within that, one of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention, which is why this one pager that Director Rogers provided you is so key, is if you look at the right side of the house that she's talking about under item 4, performance monitoring, Commissioner Hambrick, the question you asked earlier about the vendor performance evaluations, if you look under options for dealing with disputes and poor performance, that's what a contract manager should be doing and managing. Commissioner Anderson, we've dealt with issues with change orders. Commissioner Franklin, we've dealt with issues with inspections. And I can go on and on with Commissioner Davis. We've talked about some issues with the Spivey Recreation Facility. So when you look at kind of how we shifted away from a contract management to the SLBE portion when it was brought on, but even in talking with Director Rogers before this meeting, the numbers of contracts that we issue that has SLBE requirements in it are far outweighed by the ones that don't. And that's where the vast majority, so when you typically look at an organization and you say, well, 90% of our problems come from 10% of our workforce, in this case with contracts, 90% of our problem, or 10% of our problems are coming from 90% of or the other way. 90% of our problems are coming from these other contracts, right? So we've really kind of, the SLBE program is critical and vital to our processes, but it's not where the vast majority of our issues are coming from, and we don't have any eyes on that, which is why this becomes so vital. So, but that was in a part where we were just kind of shuffling resources to meet the need at that time, but now it's come back to cause some real issues within Ms. Rogers' shop. And kind of going back, one thing she did not mention, which I think is critical, is when you look at who's qualified to do those GDOT contracts, it's Ms. Rogers and one of her other senior members. So when you only have two people in an organization that can manage a large number of transportation projects, who's processing those RFBs, those ITBs, the RFPs, the RFQs, all the other initials that they have to process, we're out of folk to do that. So that becomes kind of, once again, that specialty nature of how she's training up her staff, and she does a phenomenal job.
But they're not here.
Problem is we got to retain them,
Yeah.
and we got to keep them here in Clayton for that stability.
Just a point that will probably make you a little bit happy. I believe it's House Bill 1192, which is just being introduced. The state is looking at if any public safety, well, the whole poaching thing goes to another municipality, they're gonna have to pay for 3 years of, for their salaries and everything. So not just you having that contract with them, the state is actually outlining that throughout the entire state.
Okay. Yeah, we have those agreements in place. I think we run it out to 4 on a prorated basis, so that we do get, but it's, the money's only a small part of it.
Correct.
It's, for a firefighter to go from nothing to paramedic is almost 2 years of training and time and experience. Same thing in the procurement world. The procurement is so technically specified to keep everybody out of jail that one of the things we want to make sure is when we get good qualified procurement people, we hold them. So getting our money back is a small part of the equation, but now the time, because as you will see in another slide here, business ain't slowing down because Ms. Carroll lost 2 procurement specialists.
Correct.
It's like 911. It never stops. So we would rather keep the employee and not have to start from scratch again. But I'm glad the state's finally recognizing that as the issue that it is, because you can afford to pay somebody $20,000 more if you're not going to spend the money to build a training center to train them to begin with.
Well, I'll sit down and talk to you to get issues on that I can take.
You'll kick me out of your office on that one.
Real quick.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm glad that question came up or that information came up because we know just as much as we want on the county aspect for that to go and play with the state, you also have to remember that GMA is very strong. They tend to outnumber us as counties, so there's that. But I do want to ask a question, not so much about the reorg, because I do agree with you. Since 2012 is way too long for you to not have someone in that role. And I apologize to you because that information was not provided to us from the operation side of the house until today. But why do we hire people who are not certified if the other municipalities don't?
And that's a great question. It's because of the pay. So when we have a
Got
job
it.
that goes out, I do get a lot of calls from people that I've worked with in the industry just over the years. And they say, Carol, look, we want to come work for you. We have a lot of benefits in Clayton County. First of all, we're not Atlanta. You don't have to do the traffic, right?
Right.
That's one of the number one things, right? The parking, all of that is available. But when I talk to them, and I say, well, you know what? I can start you off, and this is a senior person that does procurement. I can start you at $46,000 because we don't have a range. They say, Carol, I'm making 75,000 now. Now, they're willing to come down some, I get that, but that's a lot to ask someone to come down to. So to your point, Commissioner, it is really about the salaries, period. If they're not required to be certified, there's 2 years that they are required, once they are in those positions, that they have to become certified. So they understand the certification and the money goes hand in hand. If I went through that, it's a very rigorous test as to do the certification. You have to go through an entire process, and it's not an easy test, I will attest to that, but once you do that, and you have went through that, and you take that with your experience, you can take that knowledge, as you will see in slides in a few moments, and even within the county, the public schools, we just lost an employee, and they're making $20,000 more. They were just certified last year. So, and that was a senior staff member within our department.
So real quick, can we cut to this part?
Yes,
How many
ma'am.
people do you need in that space, and what is the salary?
Sure. So what I've looked at in this part of that is that we're looking at having that contract management position restored.
Okay.
And that would probably be around 75 or so.
Okay.
And then we're looking at having two people on the administrative side. So the salaries, I think we're requesting for the junior position, I think is around 50, and for the senior, it's around 62.
The reason I'm asking, we're only talking about 2 positions right now that you're talking about that are certified.
We're talking about 3 positions with
Three?
with the manager, yes, ma'am. And then all of those would have to be certified or come in the door certified.
Okay, and because this is the first time this is coming before us, the part about being certified, that's a board. The board would have to, we're going to vote on it and then vote on the salary. We'll vote on changing the requirements and the salary.
Well, I think the salary would be a part of the actual budget, what we're bringing in the
that part.
budget, and the certification would be what we would do through HR as part of the job description.
Let me tell you why real quick I'm asking, because it doesn't make sense to me, considering that when you're dealing with counties, you're dealing with a whole lot more money than cities are. So I can't understand why, as a county, when we're moving more widgets, doing more, purchasing more in volume, that a person can go to a small city that doesn't even have, you know, a budget of not even $1 million or whatever, that they got to be certified over there. But we got a $300 million budget, and they don't have to be certified. That's a huge gap and an issue we need to correct immediately, outside of the budgetary process, because that just rings all kind of bells. That's probably part of the reason we lost the $559,000 dealing with other projects. If you don't have somebody in there to monitor these things, and like with Nova, there's somebody here right now, there's someone upset about Nova not doing what they need to do, but if we had someone in there to manage and to be certified, then a lot of this would not be an issue, I think, or hope.
And I think, Commissioner, one way to answer your question about some of the municipalities, if you look at it, is a lot of them, in the examples, we'll show you the exact examples and where they went and the pay differences. They don't necessarily provide the same level of services that we do. So when you look at, we lost one to City of Stonecrest, right? So when you look at what services does Stonecrest provide, procurement is a large part of their entire operation, right? So obviously they're going to focus heavily on those procurement positions and making sure that they have those people, and they don't provide fire, they don't provide a lot of the other ancillary services, so they're not having to split their pie in as many pieces, right?
Right.
What we're trying to bring to light is the fact that because we do process so much more, it highlights the need to make sure that Central becomes a focal point, because both myself and Director Rogers, like I said, to her credit, has heard the concerns and the complaints and a lot of the issues that come out of procurement and contract issues. We understand it, we hear it. So part of it was, okay, well, let's put the smelly fish on the table and talk about why is this, right? And that's kind of what we're doing tonight is here's the high level overview. We want to give you the in-depth data so now we can have more conversations between now and adoption of the budget. We didn't want to just throw this in the budget presentation and try to explain it, but...
One more quick thing on that, not to cut you off. Let me add to what you're saying, Chief. But not only that, as we're speaking about the amount that we're dealing with on a county level, but let's be clear, the fiduciary responsibility for a county government is quite different than a school system or a city. So for that reason alone, we need to go ahead and correct this. I don't think people really understand in the community that your county government is actually the purse holder of all county funding, including the school system. And so that means that we've got to make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's more than anyone else. So if we're only talking about three, you said 3 or 4 positions, I just think when it comes to the certification portion of it, I mean, my bells went off like that needs to be corrected immediately.
And we are getting ahead of the presentation, because I think some of the questions we're asking is actually within this presentation. So let's get back to the presentation, and those questions hopefully will be answered.
Yes, sir, they will be, but I just want to make sure we understand, when we're talking about those certifications, that's just for those
That's what I
3
was speaking
positions.
about.
Every position in central services carries a certification, which comes with a cost that we're absorbing that makes that employee more. So the tier level that we've set up that she'll go over and is in your binder is kind of a pay for certification, like you did with PD, like I did with fire, like we did with fleet. So as it gives employees incentives to go get the certifications, but then to stay put
Perfect.
is what it does.
Perfect.
Ms. Rogers.
Okay, thank you. So the next one I wanted, as we talked about growth and demand, I wanted you to actually give you some numbers. The requisitions run off the fiscal year, so we run those from July to June. The contracts actually run on the calendar year. So if you'll be able to see that those numbers increase. Once again, these are for things that come through central services for purchasing. Especially on the contract side, if you'll see in 2020, we were processing around 338 contracts. Now in 2023, it's 533. I can tell you that we're only 2 months into the year, and we already at number 100. So we don't know what that number will look like once we complete that. When you talk about a contract, you're talking about renewals. Any type of agreement, whether the dollar amount is $75,000 or under. Even if they're doing construction, it's only $50,000. We still need a contract for that, just because it did not have to go through a formal process. So those are some of the numbers. I'm going to come back to the requisition as part of one of the solutions that we want to offer to the board of how we can move those a little quicker. But I did want to give you those numbers. We talked about central services. Inside of your book, your binder, you do have an org chart, but I just wanted to quickly kind of let you see those numbers. Please be mindful that each position, that each division carries an administrator in that number. So it's not just 7 people working on contracts, it's one person that's managing those other 6 people. So I just wanted you to see that as well. I did want to touch on the staff attorney. That staff attorney is a part of central services staff. They obviously work with Attorney Reed as necessary, but we actually process our own agreements in-house. So you have one person processing 533 agreements, and in all the demand letters, all those things that come out of that, that attorney is a part of central services. But certainly we work with Attorney Reed office whenever necessary. Vacancies, quickly, on our contract side, because the number is so small, once again, we're talking about 7 people. We have not, those 2 senior specialist positions have been vacant for over a year and a half. So to the question of who's doing the RFPs, it's my contracts administrator and my assistant director. We just can't keep the people because of the amount. We get them trained, certified, the whole thing, and they take that RFP knowledge, which is a very technical and complex process, and they go to another location for that. So right now, that's who we have doing it. The RFPs, we have more of those, because once again, you're talking about an increase of services for the county. Therefore, you have to do an RFP. A bid is not always the best fit. Sometimes it doesn't matter what the lowest cost is. We want the most qualified person able to do that service to the county. And so if you look at that, you'll see that we have currently 4 contract specialist juniors. All of those juniors have been employed in our department for less than 2 years. All of them came in entry level, meaning they had less than 2 years' worth of procurement experience. So that's the staff that we're training up. I have invested 7 months with a procurement specialist that has won awards across the state and nationally, who actually comes out of the state for an intense 7-month training for the entire staff, 2 days a week for an hour and a half. And that is what helped us propel them to do the certification, because you have to have that book of knowledge. But I did want to let you know, the number of the 2 years. Our purchasing is in a little bit better shape. However, they lost their senior specialist to the school board, and I'll speak about that in a moment. And they have a junior specialist position available as well. And we have one person for our warehouse. And note that the warehouse does all the surplusing. And I will tell you, as the budget increases, certain departments, we have a lot of things we have to move out in surplus. So I will speak on that for just a moment. So, the base salary. In your packet, I did include more in-depth information so that you will be able to see that. I did want to give you actually the job descriptions for these positions that we lost, so you can all really can see the numbers are there, they're comparable. We lost one employee recently to the school board. You can see the difference. The 46,000 is our max of what we start our senior procurement specialists, our contract specialists at. They both are the same, even though they're on other sides of the house. You'll see what the range is at the school board. Obviously, I don't know that person's salary, but I do know they would at least at 63,000. And they also had their certification. MARTA, we've lost 2 employees. If you'll see, they start you off at 70,000. And they don't require the certification, but you have to obtain it within 2 years. So the same person that's trained our staff is also working with MARTA, Fulton County, training their staffs as well. City of Stonecrest, we lost one person to that. That employee did resign. That was more of a junior position, but once again, $10,000 more. You can't compete with that, and this one, it is, that is what we did. So what I wanted to do is put in your packet so you can actually see those positions as they were listed by each one of those entities. So one of the solutions we talked about is DCOO has spoke about is the tier. I wanted you all to see on the left-hand side the positions that would be affected. That's pretty much all our positions except for the senior managers for each division. Those are the 19 positions. We wanted to create the career path. Tier 1 would be entry level, which is fine. You have the option of moving up by going through the certification process, experience, additional education. We're looking at that. When we actually shop, it will be based on where you fall on that tier level, how you come into central services. So now we have a way to compensate you for what you bring to the county. Also, we want to do the certification incentive pay. All of that is in your packet as well, what numbers we're looking at in the certification. As we talked about, the contract compliance part, the one that manages the SLBE, I just want to briefly touch on that. You need to be certified in that as well. We have a compliance person in there. I spoke with them today because I wanted to bring you some real live numbers. Because there is a compliance person in SLBE to ensure that the contractors use the subs that they're supposed to use and that they meet that SLBE goal, we have over 95% compliance with SLBE.
Awesome.
So we have a person dedicated. That person goes on the job. She goes out to the site. She makes sure if you tell me ABC Company is who my sub is, that's what we do. But we have one person dedicated to that. So I wanted to just kind of touch on what we know compliance can do if it is available to us.
Can you tell everyone what SLB is since it's
Yes,
being
ma'am,
broadcast?
because I do the procurement acronyms. So that's our small local business enterprise program, and it's dedicated to making sure that we have opportunities for subcontractors on our major construction and other projects. So we talked a little bit about a lot of things. We want to focus now and shift a little bit and talk more about some solutions. One of them, of course, was the tier level, and that is certification, and that is directly with central services. But there's other things that the county can do as well. So informal purchase by user departments. The purchasing code, even though we are centralized, it allows us to decentralize $5,000 and allow the user department to use that to purchase goods and services without coming directly through central services. But that authorization is within the procurement code, so it is a part of central services, meaning that user department would follow our procedure. And for $5,000 and under, you're only required to have one quote. You still would have to have insurance. What you cannot do is divide the purchase so that you can circumvent coming to central services. So, you can't do $5,000 on Monday to the same vendor and then you do it again on Friday. That's one of the things we look for. It cannot be used for frequently used products. You should not be purchasing your paper with this because those are things you know you need. If you need an annual contract for widgets, you should not be purchasing your widgets through this process. So that is one thing that we have. Also, everything has to be approved by that department head. The same way I'm responsible to you all to ensure that I am documenting and I'm purchasing per the code, the user department has the same obligation as well. We would actually audit those purchases, and if we can, and as I get to another slide, if we can shift some of this, we have the personnel in-house that can actually do that now. So they would audit that. If we find that they are not doing what they're required to do, we can take their purchasing power and say, you know what? If you need something for $200, you get to come see Central Services. You don't get to purchase that yourself. That is one of the things. So also, if we see that there's a problem, we refer them to the COO's office for disciplinary action as needed. So here's that number again. I want you to take a look and see how many of our requisitions are under $5,000. 2020, 10,583. Only 1,000 of them we should have probably been processing. Now, there may be some other numbers, some things that we need to put on annual contracts, but if you can see, the power is already there for that department head to be able to purchase those small dollar items. But I know you wanted to speak a little bit more about that.
So where this comes in when we talk about trying to streamline Ms. Carroll's operations and how her people can be more efficient, we put a lot of trust in our department heads. In some cases, we ask them to manage multi-million dollar budgets, $500,000 pieces of equipment, so on and so forth, but we won't let them buy $100 worth of X without getting 5 or 6 other people involved. The net effect of that is Ms. Carroll has 7 positions allocated to purchasing. They're spending well over 90% of their time doing things that by code our department heads can do. So in one of our solutions that she'll talk about a little bit further is putting that onus back on our department heads and saying, hey, understanding with the increased training that we're bringing in on procurement, Ms. Carroll's already doing, the increased disciplinary and oversight that the COO's office asked the board for just a month or so ago, giving us a little bit more authority to manage our department heads. We understand that with that oversight, we can substantially reduce some of the workload on Ms. Carroll's shop, allowing those 7 purchasers to go focus on those high dollar items to be able to move them faster. By doing that, it does a couple things. One of the things that finance is looking at trying to do now is getting away from request for check, right? You go buy it and then ask for an invoice and then we just pay it later. Well, to do that, we got to streamline some other processes because we do recognize that speed is of the essence in procurement with public safety, with building and maintenance, with fleet. The ability to move quickly, right? If you need a set of tires for a vehicle that we don't stock, you got to put the PO in, you got to wait for that to go through Central, it's got to bounce around finance, come back to Central, it's 4 days before you can just go down there and buy a set of tires, right? Where now we've got a vehicle out of service for a week when it should have been out of service for about an hour and a half. Yep. So it's just about getting faster and doing things that our procurement code already allows us to do. So one of the simple fixes is put the responsibility where the responsibility should be and then hold our department heads accountable. We understand there's an increased level of accountability and we understand kind of the taboo around the next slide, which gets into the P card board. But with that becomes accountability, and that's what this process is all about. But if we want to streamline our purchasing and up it, at some point we're going to have to do what our code allows us to do. So we can start to fix some of the other issues because we can't go at it both ways because every policy decision we make in some way filters down to Central Services and has an effect on them. So if finance does away with requests for check, her workload goes up. When we get to the end of the budget year and there's this mad scramble to spend what's left in our budgets, their workload goes up. Yep. So an already clogged system gets worse because of kind of some other practices and things that we do just as a matter of business over the year. So while we recognize this is kind of the first time we've talked openly about a lot of these things, it's time to talk openly about a lot of these things because it's having a drastic impact on our ability to move. And quite frankly, sometimes unfairly, Ms. Carroll and her shop takes the brunt of that. And so that's kind of, once again, kudos to her asking for this. This is not me saying, hey, we got to do something different. It's Ms. Carroll saying, we got to do something different. And this is kind of just our shot at that.
Is this BPR exercise complete, or is it in progress? Where do we stand with it?
What, say that?
Business process re-engineering exercise that you're taking with this department, is it, in what phase is it?
So we've gone through and understood, I mean, there are some things that if this board wanted to move forward with, the informal purchase process with our department heads, P-cards, those are things this board's vetted, approved, and is currently in our code. We could do that tomorrow,
Well,
within reason. Everything else we've talked about, we're at now, we've done the homework, we've set the tier levels. Now it's going to come before this board for consideration as a part of the FYE 25 budget process. So looking at the program holistically, we could implement 30% of it today. The other part, because it does have such a budgetary impact, we wanted to go through the process and let the board consider it. But we felt it important enough to give you the reasons why we're bringing the request as a part of the budget. So holistically, we could fix it beginning July 1.
that's what I want to hear.
Yes, sir.
And to your question, Commissioner, we have already done, all the job descriptions are completed, the tier level, so we have already set the standard of having everything ready. It's just at the point that it's approved by the board. We have someone in place that has a lot of experience. We feel like, you know, we can bring somebody on board, we can get this thing kicking off. We do some level of it now, so it's just a matter of whenever the funding is available that we can officially kick that off. So the next slide is the fund slide, because once again, they can purchase all these things, but if I call the vendor and I say, look, I need those 4 tires, and the vendor says, well, I'm gonna need a little bit of money for those 4 tires, then they have to come to Central Services because they need a PO, right? The county is not gonna cut a check for services we haven't received, right? That's where the PO comes in. But if you had that P card, then that ability is already there by the user department. The P card is managed through finance. Central Services is involved in that we're auditing the purchasing of it. Once again, making sure they're not circumventing and they're using the P card to purchase things that should be on a contract. So the county policy, I did include that in your binder, is in there. It references itself back to the state procurement, the state P card, which is what we would use, that contract that the state has with, I think it was Wells Fargo. That's the policy that we would look at, or we could, you know, do our own. But we've already did extensive research with that policy. So I think I've vetted that policy probably about 3 to 4 times over, you know, the last 10 years, understanding, you know, is that, you know, the policy has to be adopted by the county. But the information is already there for us to move forward. So we did look at, if we did that, we would probably need a pilot program, and we looked at the departments that we know have that need. The public safety, obviously, building and maintenance, you know, they're out and about, they need a screw, they don't have money to buy the screw, right? You're not gonna come back to Central Services and get a purchase order for $5, so that person has to, you know, pay for the screw. I don't know if that process to get reimbursable. We don't do petty cash anymore, thank goodness, but, you know, that is one of the things that you have to look at. So these are the 5, based on what I know as far as purchasing, looking at what our spend analysis is. This is where, if we were gonna go forward with the pilot program, those are the 5 I think would probably better be suited for that. Once again, the card is issued and maintained by the finance department. They monitor the use of that P card. There's an administrator that comes along with that as well. And then finally, internal audit per the code would have to audit the statements biannually.
And one other brief thing that I meant to have her add to the slide, and I forgot to get it to her in time, but it's also becoming increasingly more difficult to find businesses that take purchase orders. So the COVID era changed a lot of that. I know when we were in the throes of COVID, you remember we came to the board and asked to use the county's credit card for emergency purchases, because during COVID, if you didn't have cash or a credit card, they hung up on you. If your answer was, I'll get you a PO, yeah, they got time for that. And since COVID did that, it's not a lot of that has come back to that. So that's another reason why this makes a lot of sense. And once again, understanding the insight and oversight that comes with it, that's why we asked for some increased authority to make sure that we can keep good oversight and take action should we need to. Don't anticipate needing to, but it needs to be there just in case, to give the board some assurance.
And another thing with the P card, like anything else, you would put what commodity codes you can purchase. That number can go up or down as needed, so if for some reason they needed to purchase more. So that is what we looked at for our solutions. I know it's a lot of information, but I'm certainly willing, of course, the DCO, to entertain any questions or anything we can clarify for you all. And just thank you all for allowing me to give this presentation on something that I feel like we need to do moving forward for my team.
All right, are there any other additional questions? And let me just say that I appreciate you providing this booklet that will give us opportunity to further vet the request, and appreciate your presentation as well as DCO. Any other additional questions?
I just want to say thank you for the presentation, and thank you for clearing up. I had a bunch of questions, but everything that you all discussed cleared up all those questions, and thank you for the presentation, especially with that P card. I think that's going to help us out a lot, and not have to wait for people having to wait for services all the time.
I just have an ask.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, before the ask, congratulations on the work you've done. That is a lot of work. But also, I would like to have a little bit of detailed information to go a deeper dive on the less than 5,000 versus the others.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you could forward that, or we can meet to go over it, because it's one thing, you did good to put the numbers up, but I really want to see what categories that they fall into. And then the other question that probably is easily answered is, does each one of those amounts still fit within the budget of each one of those departments? Or is that above and beyond, or how are we going to track that in terms of budgetary process?
No, ma'am. So the threshold is set just for the amount of the individual purchase. That's going to differ with each department and what's in their approved budget. So
Okay.
regardless of the fact that I have the authority to spend $5,000 as a department head per transaction, if I'm only allotted $20,000 in my budget, when I get to $20,000, I'm out of money.
That's what
So
I
my
wanna
P
know.
card doesn't do me any good
Right.
anymore, because I have no more money. So the only thing it does, it doesn't give them an unlimited budget now for stuff. It just makes it easier. So to Ms. Rogers' point, I can tell you when I was fire chief, there's many a times I just bought stuff out of my pocket because it's faster than waiting 2 weeks to get a bolt to fix something.
It makes sense.
So it's just easier just to go swipe your card and move on with life.
And get a tire. And move on.
Or get a tire or something to that effect. So it's not going to create this windfall now where, oh, I got a credit card, we can go hog wild. I'm still limited by my approved budget. And if I go over that, then I have to answer for that.
So that will be presented to us just like we do on the other contracts, that when you do the contract presentation monthly, will that be added to that presentation?
Yes, ma'am, because it is a
Awesome.
policy and it's a contract that we would have to go into. Like I said, we would look at piggybacking off of the state's contract. You can modify it, but they have a great model. Why reinvent the wheel sometimes? So if we were to move forward, that's what we would look at. Yes, ma'am.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, thank you again for all the work that you've put into this. And we will move on to the next presentation.
Thank you.
Chief Roberts.
Good evening, Chairman and Board of Commissioners, and thank you for just allowing me just a few minutes to address your consideration for possible change to our alcohol ordinance related to actual consumption on premises. What you should have in front of you is two documents. One is the highlighted document for a proposed draft change to our alcohol consumption hours, pushing that time back 1 hour to 3 a.m. The document behind that is our current ordinance, which requires a cease of sales and consumption at 2 a.m. along with our employees vacating the premises 30 minutes after, patrons 30 minutes after, and then the employees an hour later. Now, I know you're looking at me going, why is the chief of police bringing something related to the alcohol ordinance before the board? Well, we've been very active in the previous year. Mid-year, July of last year, we sent out flyers to our local restaurants, bars, and lounges to ensure that they were aware of our county ordinance, to make sure that they weren't operating outside those license requirements and the hour requirements. We wanted to give them a heads up that we would be very aggressive in our enforcement during the summertime hours because there's a nexus between a lot of our crimes against persons and the operation of restaurants and lounges outside of our county ordinance. When we had those contacts with at least 5 of our businesses, many of the owners and managers cited the fact that they were required to close at 2 a.m., whereas in our neighboring jurisdictions, they were either 1 or 2 hours longer in an effort to make money. So then, in the interest of economic development and the opportunity for our small business owners to make the profits that they want to make while still being in compliance with our ordinance, I respectfully ask the board to consider the highlighted adjustments that we're proposing, which would essentially push that consumption hour to the 3 a.m. hour. Is that short and that easy?
You know what I like, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Any
With
questions
that,
for Chief?
yes, sir. Questions?
Do you have a timeline as to when you would recommend this go in play?
If the board doesn't have any opposition, I would anticipate that to occur within the next 3 to 4 weeks.
And let me ask this, and I know you have a great relationship, like you said, you send out surveys and you talk to the owners of these establishments. Just by there being the possibility, well, not a possibility, more cars on the road, you have adequate staff to be able to make sure. Well, never mind.
No,
Because you're gonna say, no, I need another 100 officers.
well, I do, but that's not actually what I was going to say, Chair. Thanks to the great leadership of this board and the changes that you made with our recruiting incentives and things of that nature, our vacancies are much lower. We're in the 20s, approaching the teens. What does that mean? That allows me to put more men and women on the streets of Clayton County to enforce our traffic laws and ensure that this type of change to the ordinance occurs in a manner that's safe and we can control it. The reason I'm not asking for 4:30 or 5 a.m. is because we need to take baby steps and monitor that change. If we can do this safely and push this an hour later, I think it benefits our small business owners, while it also offers an opportunity for our citizens to be able to celebrate and entertain and spend money in Clayton County versus going next door to Henry DeKalb or wherever they want to go, because those places stay open till 3 a.m. or later.
Good point. Any other questions for the chief?
I do.
Go ahead.
I am finding this a little hard to follow because I see a negative return on investment here with our safety and our possible crime rate going up. With this, granted, I understand the whole concept on the economic impact. But even with that short economic impact, I see, in a sense, in my mind, a negative return on investment here. Please just
Enlighten you some more. Since October of 2022, our agency had to expend resources responding to at least 5 unauthorized illegal restaurants and lounges that did not have licenses or continued to operate into the wee hours of the morning. When we responded to those incidents, we had to respond en masse. The explanations given by those managers and owners is, I'm trying to make $1. You're making me close at 2 a.m. The citizens in Clayton County are either going to the cab or wherever to spend their money that will come to Clayton County government because we have an ordinance that does not meet the needs of our citizens. We can manage this as a public safety agency in partnership with the owners and managers because we've been proactive and engaged them. When we engaged them in the summer of 2023, they understood what the enforcement was going to be. They agreed to ensure that they complied with the ordinance up front. And what we found was those businesses that we did have to enforce were the ones that weren't at the table with us in partnership. When we sent the flyers out and said, come down, sit down with the chief of police and his staff, let's review the ordinance. And when we had that meeting, those leaders told me then that they weren't making the money they needed to stay in business with the closure at 2 a.m. in the morning versus 3. And once again, it's not 4, it's not 5, because some of our peers who border us are there.
But I also see a lot of the and hearing it from some of the folks that I know own some places, you have folks in Atlanta, the city of Atlanta, that come down to Clayton to the illegal after-hour spots. So my whole piece is, we've got to begin, I don't see, I'm still trying to find justification in this, though. That's
Well, you just said it, though,
Right.
Commissioner.
Yeah.
They're coming
They're
anyway,
coming anyway.
and the county is not reaping the financial benefits of them coming to an illegally operating business. We're not getting taxes on illegal alcohol. The government is not getting the proceeds, and the owners are not operating in a manner that's safe, which places demand on public safety resources when we have to respond. Every one of you have at least one restaurant, bar, or lounge that we've had to respond to that was operating illegally. And when it happens, it demands a lot of resources, because we're talking about spaces that have upwards of 50 or more people. And what we usually find, I got the packet right here, I'm glad you asked that question. When we engage these folks, we find that they're arrested for marijuana, tampering with evidence, possession of firearms, wanted person located, firearm during the possession of a firearm during a crime, and cocaine. So what I'm telling you is, if we get proactive and we partner with the management and the owners on the front end, my hope is that we don't have to respond to these places like we're already having to do as an agency. I'm sorry.
Can I say something also?
Yes, ma'am.
For some of our bars and sports bars, et cetera, they do hire off-duty police officers, correct, to work some of those, some of them? Correct.
Very great point, Commissioner.
Okay.
And usually the ones that are hiring off-duty police officers and deputies are the ones that are in compliance. But the ones that demand the greater resources are the ones that commissioners may call me or text me about, saying, hey, I got a complaint from a citizen that club so-and-so stays open at 5 a.m. in the morning, and they got 100 people coming down there every Friday and Saturday, and they're running off of generators. I didn't just make that up.
I know.
Commissioner Hambrick.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Commissioner Hambrick.
yes, Chief.
Yes, ma'am.
And to your point, two things. When I have relatives that come into town, they will go somewhere else that stays open longer, because they'll say, I'm not coming here because, this place closes at 1 or 2 or whatever. And the other thing, as far as economic development is concerned, businesses that want to come to Clayton County will look at that ordinance also and say, hey, I can't make that much money in Clayton County. I'd rather go to ABC County or whatever. So I think it's, as long as we have the police.
As long as we have that enforcement.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and I think it's a good thing, definitely economically.
I understand Commissioner Davis's reluctance, because being the police chief, I would have the same. But I think if we're proactive and engaging all of our restaurants and lounges, having them come to the table on the front end to gather an understanding, then there's no questions on the back end when they're in violation. And I will come back to the License Review Board and ask for those licenses to be revoked.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir.
So this is on the agenda for,
I'll get it on the agenda. I want it buy-in from the board first.
Well,
he stays long.
Duly noted.
all right, Clayton County, Clayton Center funding request presented by Ms. Works.
Good evening, everyone.
Dr. Adams.
I am not Ms. Works, but Dr. Adams and actually Mr. Jackson are one of our board members is present as well. The request that you have in front of you, first I want to just say again, good evening. Thank you to everyone for your continued support of Clayton County Community Service Board in mental health, substance abuse, and developmental disability services. But I do have a request in front of you today. You can go to the first slide. The first one just kind of talks about just basically thanking you guys and kind of giving you a little bit of information about who we are. We are the safety net provider for Clayton County. We provide services to those that have no insurance or those that are underinsured, and we support various departments, although we are quasi-state, quasi-county. I think I serve on almost every board in this county in addition to doing my regular 8 to 5, plus 8 to 9, 8 to 10. If you drive by them, usually still down the street from you guys working, or on Saturdays out supporting the community for whatever needs we have. But I want to thank you guys for all of the support. We know that during the pandemic, we were deemed as essential employees, so we could not close. We stayed operational, and we had to work regardless, face to face. We could not do services like a lot of other places. So even with my administrative staff, we came in as well. We did not stay home because everybody else that was seeing individuals were in the building, so we were here as well. That was one of my mandates. So fast forward, you can go to the next slide. Just right now, I'm here to ask today to help for sustaining us in our operations. We are requesting for from the county a small amount that I would think an investment into who we are and what we do for the county of $1.5 million to sustain our operations. And this is looking at where we are, getting us to the end of the fiscal year. And you can go to the next slide. Basically, what we kind of want to just talk about how we serve. We're serving adults, we serve children, we serve outpatient treatment. We got the IDD population of 115. We serve them mostly at our 217 Stockbridge Road location. And right now, we're also immersed into the schools, and we're doing about 20,000 activities there a year. And with that, if you note that when I first started with you guys in 2018, we were in the hole. I took over this agency. We were about $2.4 million in the hole, in the red, and we have worked. We have gotten that down to about $890,000 of old debt. However, what we found was, you can go to the next slide, is that as we have moved forward, the payroll costs has really, this past fiscal year has really taken a toll on us. And with that, if you look and see, we 21, if you looked at where we were, our payroll was at 6.2 million. And then you can see now, as of the end of January 31st, 2024, we're at about 4.9 million. So I averaged that out. We're running about 702,000 a month in payroll costs. And if we add that up, we'll end FY24 at about $8.4 million. So that's an increase, as you can see, from FY21 to 2024 of about $2 million altogether. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you. We came in one of our areas where we increased payroll was that we did get ARPA funds from the county, and we appreciate that. And we had was trying to bring all of our staff up. At that time, we had quite a few that were under $13 an hour. People were making like $8 and something an hour, $9 an hour. So we brought them up to 13, but then when I came, you guys had actually suggested we take them up to 15, which we did. Lo and behold, in the next year, the governor came and gave everybody a $5,000 raise. Then last year, he gave everybody a $2,000 raise. Well, those type of funding mandates from the state, although for other state agencies that are in the state budget, they will get that additional dollars every year. We don't get that. We're not a budget or cabinet level position. We earn our money just like a hospital or a clinic through the services that we provide. So therefore, as you can see, if you look, it has really taken a toll on us as far as these expenditures. And as we look at those, what it's averaging out to is an increase in our overall expenses of that's exceeding our budget of about $300,000 a month. So the only other option is that we're at a critical point because we're at the mid-year of the fiscal year. I either have to start deciding if I'm going to lay off doctors, psychiatrists, nurses, therapists that everybody in mental health desperately needs, and we need them to operate, or in my other programs where I have the residential individuals that are disabled that are in our homes, cannot really cut all of those because somebody has to be there 24/7 because of the need and the regulations from the state. Either rolling back to the lower pay. If I lower their pay, then we already kind of know what that's going to happen. I'm going to lose people. And I want to say that prior to the pandemic, we were pretty much with all the community service boards, the average of turnover was running close to 40% turnover in the staff. At that time, we were right at the high. We were coming right about 29% in turnover. But today, we're only at 9% turnover in our agency for the last 2 fiscal years, which most people, that's kind of unheard of, which says that because of the work and the salaries, people are content and they're staying with us versus leaving. Another area is that we've had increased rents. If you look at this chart, I'm not going to read each one of you, but overall, it's coming out to about a 60 from FY '22 to the present. We're up to about $65,000 more per year in rents that we have to pay to house these services and facilities. And that's not including the utilities. Okay, you can go ahead. The next area is basically what we're asking is for these additional funds that help to help us with things like utilities, supplies, food, transportation, fuel, and fees. They've all increased. We provide transportation to our services for individuals that live in our county. We don't bill for that on some of those areas because the issue is most of those that get the Medicaid, the way the rules are set up, you can't, it's like a double dip, so we have to take a hit. We either provide the service because we don't have the MARTA going everywhere yet in our lower levels of our county. We have to go pick up. We have to bring them to the site for the services. So that's a hit that we have to take. However, the gas fuel cost has gone up tremendously from, if you look at from FY '21 to FY '22. You can go. Thank you. And this is kind of, I gave you just a little graph of how the fuel cost is going from 21. Of course, we were in COVID. We weren't doing a whole lot. But we picked back up in 22, 23, and as you can see already, as the end of January 31st, we spent about $35,000 in our fuel costs for transportation. Next slide. Also, I was going to ask too, we still had some funds, and we were just trying to get clarification. I believe that we would be within the guidelines of spending those funds from the initial ARPA allotment, but I just wanted to make sure we were, had clarification. We had asked for funds for some hardships for the individuals with their co-pays, et cetera, and self-pays. And what we were finding that we're getting, some of them, it's coming back as like a bill to them, so they have a balance that they owe. So we wanted to be able to use that to clear them up so they can still continue to get their services, but just wanted to make sure that we're fall in that same category. And then also we had some remaining, about 40,000 left in equipment, and we desperately need a safety door at our CSS site. I know many of you have been over to that location and see the kind of individuals we serve there. And we also need some specialty tables to accommodate those individuals. A lot of those are broken, and we've been doing the best we can with what we have. And we were trying to make sure that would fall in that category of the equipment for those funding. The reason why I really have been leaning on my county is because when I look at my other counterparts across the state, and I just use like for our right here in the metro area, Fulton, DeKalb, and Clayton. If you look, as you see in Fulton County, they budget $3.7 million for their community service board. DeKalb, $2.8 million per year for operating, and then we get, it's not a budgeted item, this is from the block grant. This is what we got last year, $369,000. So if you can see the difference in how they're able to do things versus us when it comes to meeting the needs of the community, because, just asking our commissioners to also see us as an investment, and give into it because we're serving the citizens of Clayton County. We do get the free building usage from you guys, and we appreciate that at Battle Creek. Also, just looking at some of the local agencies in the county, with DFACS, the Board of Health, and then look at Clayton Center, basically where we are. So we're just asking for, if we would definitely could be considered for those funds, because the next option would mean that I have to start cutting critical services. We support, I believe, every entity, in the county, from Southern Regional to the jails to DFACS to the police, every area we support. And our services are critical. So we already are looking at in Clayton County, there's such a deficit in healthcare right now, in mental health. We are Georgia's almost last in the nation. And then when you look by county, even though we're the 5th largest populace in the state, county-wise, we're like 125 when it comes to ranked 125 when it comes to health. And mental health is way down below that. When we look at access to practitioners, when you look at therapists that serve the individuals, when you look at the state average and then you look at the county average, but if you look at ours, we really have, even though we cannot, right now, I wish I could wave the magic wand and meet every person's need in the county, but we do have a very, very good process for the number of licensed therapists that we've been able to attract. And especially the biggest area to meet the need, you have to have a psychiatrist. We have two. We have a child and adolescent psychiatrist at our child and adolescent site, and we have also a adult psychiatrist, and I have 3 APRNs. Those are nurse practitioners that work, 2 at the Battle Creek site. 1 is on telehealth, and then I also have 1 that does the HIV process, and then we have also, through a grant I wrote for Kaiser, we have 1 that's now doing health and wellness, an APRN, which the mental health, even though we don't do a lot of the medical piece of it, the health and wellness brings that whole full circle, because instead of sending out a lot of labs and things, we can do a lot of things right there on site. So the biggest area has just been right now, the revenues are not as coming in as fast as the expenses are, and the way that we bill, we are on this model with the state called fee for services. So once we do a service, we have to send out for reimbursement, which we have to wait on those funds to come back. However, when it comes to the reality of how we work, payroll, utilities, and things like that, those are fixed costs that come every month. So we have to make sure we have funding for that. So looking right now, if I'm going to keep with the same trajectory, that's what we will need to kind of sustain our operations. It's not going to make us make a profit. It just means that we'll continue to be able to be here for Clayton County, work with the jails and all those with the jail reentry process, and continue. We have our Mount Zion location, the Paula Crane site. That's a drop-in center. No one pays to go there. The individuals go in and they can, we have what we call CPSs, certified peer specialists, that are there to help them with their treatment, help them with recovery. We have every type of step that's available, 12-step, Alcoholics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous. They don't even have to give their name because, and we can't bill for those services because it is a grant oriented. So the grant only pretty much pays for the rents, the staff, the utilities over at that location. So as those are not billable services for us, we also do Hep C, HIV testing at that location, and then we also do GED prep and also free job training for those individuals at that site. And on the other side of the building, we do the ones where we have the actual people that are in treatment for substance abuse, et cetera. So that's kind of where we are, I think. Questions?
Yeah, so let me ask this.
Yes, sir.
Since you fall under the purview of the state, and
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sure we all are thinking this, and I understand what you said about the fees for services have to get reimbursed
Yes,
and
sir.
so forth. Have you made the ask of the state to help cover some operational costs to sustain you?
Yes, sir. We have asked, and as of right now, that is not something that seems to be. They say they have no money in the budget, additional money in the budget. We've been asking, I think, since before I became CEO, we've been asking them to clean up the old debt. That would really, really be a very, very helpful process, because if you can only imagine trying to maintain your house, pay all your regular bills, and still paying on old debt. So that really is very stressful. It inhibits us from doing a lot of other creative things that we would love to do in the community because we like funding. But yes, whereas of right now, that's pretty much where we are with the state.
Where are you at with your staffing levels?
Number of staff?
Yeah.
We are.
Vacancies.
Vacancies, we don't have a whole lot right now. Critical vacancies, we have a couple of the specialty grants. We have the one that we have with you guys that we've been working the field, the co-responder model. We have a couple of more interviews coming up this week. But as far as the levels of everywhere else, we could always use more staff, but we are kind of working it bare minimal. We have very few administrative back office staff members. You know, I've tried to keep that at the low levels to just maintain and try to make sure the highest level of staff are at that service-oriented area. We have 10 drivers for our transportation. We could always use more in that area because the more we have, the more people we could serve. But right now we're working with 10, and a few of those are part-time that's coming in to help us support.
Other questions for Dr. Adams?
Yes, please.
Commissioner Frank?
Yes. All right.
Yes, ma'am.
I took good notes for you.
Okay.
First, let's start off with this. Thank you for the job that you all are doing, and I see one of the board members that used to be my student out in the audience. Thank you for the job you're doing.
Thank you.
I think we need to do definitely a deeper dive on your ask, and I want to tell you why I'm starting
Okay.
with that. There are two things that stick out to me. not just the services that are rendered, and we know they're needed, and we
Yes.
understand that this keeps people off of the streets that are homeless.
Yes.
People do not understand that homeless situations have a direct relation to the amount of funding we put in our mental health
Yes.
support within the community. So I give you that one. However, I want to make sure you're clear on something. You brought a slide to us.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay? Go back to your rental,
Okay.
and then we'll go to that one.
Okay.
More so than the salaries, what we need to do to help you with your budget, we've got to get together with our process of SPLOST. And we know that we have to provide these levels of service. Just last month, or last board meeting, which I support Hearts to Nourish Hope. Let me make sure people understand that. But we decided to spend extra money out of CDBG funding and just awarded it to one organization that we're not required to provide services in locations to by the state.
Yes.
And not only did we award it to them as a board, but we also awarded that money to go into the fixing up of their building. And I've received several concerns about many of these locations. So now let's start off with the locations. Through our SPLOST process, we can actually move out of having to rent these spaces as we're developing out our plan for the next 10 to 20 years. We need to develop out a place for you as opposed to having to be tied to increase of rent. It's no different than owning a home. Right. You know, you can rent a home where you're subjected to higher rent rates. I mean, you can rent a home, you're subjected to higher rent rates, or we own that piece of property. Yes. And that SPLOST that we have passed every year, this needs to be in there so that we can cover these locations, and then also look at whether these locations are where they need to be within the next 10 to 20 years. And then a step further, it needs to be correlated with our MARTA services to ensure that, as you just stated, you don't have to spend money to go pick up people, but they are in areas of need, and then also that people have access to it. Now I want to go back to your other slide real quick. And that's something that we can do as a board. Go back to your population slide. Now, I want you to be careful on this piece. Not that one, the funding. I just did the calculations. Clayton County actually is the highest per capita of pay. Back, you want to go to your slide? Not that one. I don't know what that noise is out there. But I want to look at this. All right? And one I need to calculate. Again, there was another comparison. You had one where you showed 698. What we need to do, this is it, by agency. What we need to do is go back on your other slide and let's calculate per capita what we're spending per population. Because you got to remember, if you're bringing something before us to say, well, this is what our counterparts are doing, if it's a state-provided service, it should be based upon the population of that community. Right. So let's do a deeper dive into that. I don't think the answer is to just, we need to give you extra money. I agree with that. But we need to have a more solid understanding of how we can make sure that our costs are going towards the services provided, and that those costs are in comparison to the other agencies per capita. Okay. So I would definitely urge for a deeper dive. I'm only a part-time commissioner, but we have staff, and we may need to get extra help because we got to fix other areas. But I think there's space for you to sit down with our staff to figure out how can we help you, not just for right now. You know, oftentimes we want to throw something out, but that's a Band-Aid. But how can we get you to the point that you're more sustainable over the next period of 10 to 20 to 30 years? Because we need to wipe out those costs for rental. We can do that.
Okay. Thank you.
But in addition to that, you also got to take into consideration that approval still on a lot of those services comes from the state. Is that correct?
For as far as where we're located?
Yeah.
No, well, we have to get, once we decide where we're going to go, they have to come in and check the building to make sure that
but
it's...
they hold this final approval. They have to inspect it, though, and clear it. But if they have already done that, those locations should be good, correct?
Yes, the ones that are under, well, there's two different bodies, DBHDD and then healthcare facility regulations. So pretty much the ones that are doing the actual outpatient services like the DD homes, all that's under HFDR, Healthcare Facility Regulations. So they'll be, what they come out and make sure is that everything is up to code as far as healthcare facility regulations is concerned. DBHCD, the only part they usually mandates is spacing, you know, like they have certain, sort of like in the school, you're gonna have this many people in there, you gotta have this much space and those things. And of course, make sure you're staying in their guidelines, but the healthcare facility comes out and says, no, this building's not gonna be able to meet the need of this.
So they don't get into where exactly it is, correct?
Not DBHCD
Okay,
as much
wonderful.
as, right.
The reason I say that is because if we do the same thing we've always did, and expect a different result, that is the true definition of insanity. So at this point, regardless of what it was okay, it's no longer okay for you. You cannot keep subjecting yourself to higher rent rates.
Right.
And as a county, we have the resources. We have CDBG funding. We have SPLOST that we can look at, even though we're coming up for a renewal. How far are we out from the renewal of the SPLOST now? About a year and a half or so? It's coming up on the ballot again.
2026.
2026. So again, we can do things to help you in the short term, but what we got to do is begin to plan for the long term. And so, you know, it doesn't matter if they said this building is okay. They'll come out and inspect another building.
Right.
And it'll probably be even better than where you're renting, based upon what has come to me from the citizens.
Yes.
Commissioner Ambert.
Yes, but first, let me clear something up, and I think it may have been said mistakenly, but we don't vote on the SPLOST every year.
No, I didn't say every year.
Anyway, how many counties do you serve?
One, Clayton.
Just Clayton County?
Yes.
Okay, and what percentage of your budget is spent on personnel, on salaries, rather?
About 70% is spent on operating costs, and then the other 30% usually hit directly to program costs. So the personnel and then like rents and utilities make up 70%. So I would say, as of right now, if we look at our budget, what we have, if it's going to end at about 8.4 this year, we're looking to make only about 11 million. So that's really going to be closer to about, this year would be running closer to about 80% of the budget.
For
personnel.
salaries?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, 80% for
Yes.
salaries. Okay, okay, you get state fund, what are your funding sources?
Insurances, the bills we Medicaid, the ones we bill, the state funds are what they call state contracted services. So what that means is when a person presents, they come into our point of entry location, they may not have insurance. We have to send up and ask for an authorization to treat that person. And a lot of times that's where citizens, it takes a longer time because we have to get all that data and information to upload into the system for the state to say, yes, I will reimburse you for that service. Well, we see the person at point of entry, they go through an intake, they got to see the nurse, they've got to see the doctor, and then that particular service gets billed out. It may be 2 to 3 weeks on average of that money coming back, but as I was stating, the fixed costs stay the same. And depending on that payer, if they have insurance, if they have a situation like with our regular insurance, if they deny a claim and then we have to dispute, my billing department has to do like a appeal, or they have to discuss with it to see if we can get reimbursed. So we get funding available to us from the state through what we call a maximum reimbursement limit. So that's what a contract amount they put out there, and they say this the most you can bill per year. But that doesn't come to us just in a fixed cost like every month. Like when I worked in the school system and I had budgets, kind of my Title I budget, my money was there every month. I didn't have to worry about those things unless I was doing some specialty funds. But in this case, it's sort of like building the plane while you're flying. I have to have these key staff members that do the services. I got to have nurses. Everybody got to see a nurse. Everybody have to see the doctor. The state has rules about how many days you got to see them within that. And then when we ask for the money back, it doesn't always come right back right away, but I still have to pay
Touching a little bit
them.
on what the chairman was saying, but this is a different question, but it does pertain to state and state funding. What type of agency are you all considered? You considered a state agency, federal?
Quasi-government, that's what they count us as. We don't really fall under the state, we don't really fall under the county. State has oversight, then you guys have oversight over us, so we're not really sort of like stepchild. But we gotta do all these services.
A little bit like, well, I guess a little bit like DFACs, I guess, but they are really state,
Right.
basically. Grants, do you all write grants?
We, yes, we've written a couple, and we've been successful in those. They have not, I mean, they're beneficial. The Kaiser grant was beneficial, and we've written a couple of other ones. But when we go for the big boys, the ones that are millions, usually we have not been as successful with. We are waiting on another one to open up. I've been trying to work through trying to find a grant writer. I actually even
I was gonna
spoke
suggest
to,
that.
yes, I spoke to some of my other CSB sisters agencies today, because we were down at the Capitol, about us pairing up and just maybe splitting the costs on a grant writer, so that we can hopefully get these funding, because we haven't had a lot of success here. We tried, some of the internal processes here, but we didn't get, the actually where we were trying to go with it. And it's a lot of those grants, the SAMHSA grants and other grants, they are very, very tight on what they're looking for in the language. So, you really have to have a good grant writer to get those funds.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner.
Yes, I just want to say thank you for the great work that you all do, because it just really concerns me, because we can't lose this agency. And a lot of times, I know when the state comes in, the first thing they try to do is get us to merge with the CAB or merge with another agency. And so I just want to say, continue the great work that you're doing. We don't need to merge with any other CSB. We need to just take care of Clayton County and the people of Clayton County. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
All right. Pilot program, early intervention. Public Defender's Office, Ms. Leslie.
Good evening, esteemed Board of Commissioners and Mr. Chairman. My name is Deborah Leslie, and I'm a criminal defense attorney here in Clayton County, and I've been practicing in Clayton County for 22 years. I'm honored to stand before you today to introduce a groundbreaking initiative that holds the potential to reshape the landscape of Clayton County's legal system, the Early Intervention Public Defender Pilot Program. At this time, please direct your attention to the presentation previously provided. In recognizing the critical need for swift and effective legal support for those facing legal challenges, especially during the early stages of legal proceedings, I have crafted a program that prioritizes timely intervention and assistance. The Early Intervention Public Defender Pilot Program aims to provide targeted legal aid, counseling, and advocacy to indigent individuals who may otherwise face obstacles in navigating the complexities of the legal process. In addition, the pilot program can effectively reduce the number of nonviolent pretrial detainees and provide greater efficiency at the jail. The pilot program will also significantly impact case outcomes, reduce jail overcrowding, and promote equitable justice for all. Benefits to our indigent clients in Clayton County. The Early Intervention Public Defender will meet with the clients before the first appearance hearing. During that meeting, the Public Defender, Early Intervention Public Defender, will complete the application for indigency prior to the hearing beginning. They will also attend the first appearance hearings with all defendants. The mission of the program is to provide timely legal representation, conduct case assessments and support, collaborate with stakeholders, establish partnerships within law enforcement agencies, social service organizations, and community groups, to name a few. We will also offer holistic support services such as Veterans Court, behavior court, and drug court. In addition, we will also provide access to social service needed for mental health and support and other resources to address the underlying issues that contribute to individuals' involvement in the justice system. The personnel required for the pilot program is a division director, 2 senior assistant early intervention public defenders, 1 social worker, and 2 administrative assistants. Also, what would be required is, of course, office space, supplies, equipment, and the internet. Funding for the intervention public defender pilot program to ensure the successful implementation and sustainability of this initiative, we propose a budget reallocation funding model in the amount of $550,000 from now until July the 1st, 2024. Benefits to the county from the pilot program: reduce jail overcrowding, reduce lawsuits, reduce complaints, verification of indigence, case discussion, early mental health assessment, early referrals to drug court, veterans court, behavior court, and the pretrial intervention program, along with monthly reporting to the county. The early intervention pilot program has proven to be the best practice. Cobb, Gwinnett, DeKalb County, and Chatham, to name a few, have established their version of the early intervention public defender program. This pilot program aims not only to ensure early legal representation, thereby reducing jail population, reducing complaints and lawsuits, but to uphold justice, protect the individual's rights, and foster a fair and equitable legal system. Thank you. Any questions?
So, Ms. Leslie, thank you for the presentation. Let me ask this. At what point in time does after someone's been arrested, at what point in time do they actually see or have an attorney assigned to them? Because what I'm seeing in this presentation is that you would see them after they're arrested for the first appearance. Is that being done now or not? And if not, at what point in time do they see an attorney?
No, Mr. Chair, that is not being done at this present time. When a person is arrested, they're initially taken through the jail and processed in. The next morning, if they haven't already been processed in, they will be processed in. The next morning, they will have their first appearance. At this point, they do not see an attorney. They are not appointed an attorney. It would be approximately 4 to 8 weeks. If they cannot bond out, if it's a bondable offense at the magistrate level, they will wait approximately 4 to 8 weeks before they see an attorney. They will only see an attorney at that stage once their case has been placed on magistrate court's preliminary calendars.
So, 4 to 8 weeks. If somebody, judging by your presentation, there will be an assessment, could be an assessment before 4 to 8 weeks. Let's say somebody needs mental care. Then they could be, because not everybody, some people in jail don't need to be in jail.
That is
they have
correct,
mental
Mr.
issues.
Chair.
So would this be an early detection type program that help in that respect?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it would be. We would meet with them approximately no later than 2 days after their arrest. At that point, we could sit down and conduct a assessment as to, does this person need mental health assessment? If so, then Our staff would prepare a motion for a mental health evaluation that can be conducted and followed through by the Early Intervention Pilot Program, which can obviously move them out of the jail population into a population, maybe the medical facility, until the provider can get there and to conduct the assessment. After we conduct the assessment, we are better able to determine jail is not that place for this person and get them into a hospital or partner with social services and get them the help they need. It may just be for medication. And then we will also be working closely with the district attorney's office to look for other assessments, programs such as mental health, behavior court, that can address that as well instead of jail.
My last question is, have you spoken to the magistrate, chief judge?
Yes, I've spoken with Chief Wright Hill, and she is in agreement with that, and it will also reduce the amount of individuals on the preliminary hearing calendars. At this point, the preliminary hearing calendars are held Mondays and Wednesdays, twice a week, and it's pretty much all day.
Commissioner Ambrick.
Yes, we were presented with something very similar to this, I think, with the magistrate judge. Last year or the year before, she wanted a new program. Anyway, but Ms. Leslie, so in your presentation, is this asking for another layer with the public defender's office?
No, ma'am, this is county run.
This would be a county department.
This will be a county department. At the State Department, the state gets to direct where the personnel will be placed. The county has no say-so in that. This is county run totally. In my 22 years, unless it's private and being retained, the defendants are not getting an attorney at first appearance. They're not seeing an attorney in first appearance. After it has been determined that they are indigent, the law states within 72 hours, they're supposed to see their court-appointed attorney. They are not. It's 4 to 8 weeks, minimally.
So, okay, clear this up. You say it's county run, so is it the public defender's office or is it?
No, ma'am, it's separate from that. It's county run. The county does not run the Clayton County Public Defender's Office. That is
So
run.
tell me, who's the county?
Excuse me?
Who's the county?
Clayton County.
I know, but what department or what agency?
The Early Intervention Public Defender Program
That's
would
why I
be
say
run.
public defender.
Yes, ma'am. It's the pilot program that would be, if accepted, is totally run by the county to ensure that our citizens here are getting prompt legal representation on the front end, which is really needed, as opposed to sitting in jail 4 to 6, maybe 8 weeks before they even see a public defender or court-appointed attorney.
So is this something you're putting in your budget?
It's not a creative.
It's-
not- She, from what I'm gleaning, her presentation is requesting that we create
A new
this
department.
intervention program
Okay.
So it's
to
in
be
the-
funded and governed by the VOC.
Oh, I thought she just said the public defender's office.
No.
But can I see you after?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd have one question. Good to see you.
How you doing, Commissioner
Doing
Franklin?
great. The 72-hour requirement, it's my understanding that, isn't it the public defender's office that's supposed to adhere to that 72-hour requirement? The reason I'm asking you that, Mrs. Leslie, Esquire, is because I remember, unfortunately, when we lost Christine, the state came and spoke to us specifically because they couldn't, for whatever reason, get a hold of anybody in the office. And we know subsequently Christine passed away. And we had people at that time in the jail for beyond that period of time. And that particular meeting was when it was explained to me that it is the public defender's responsibility to provide that representation within 72 hours. So what I'm going to suggest is that, once again, we reevaluate what's happening with those who we do have. Believe it or not, let's remember, board, we do appoint that agreement to those providers. Some providers in some areas, especially when they're dealing with minor offenses, we need to look at how they're operating with the funding we're giving them, and then look at their program in concurrent in a process where we can look at both of them. But thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you for bringing it to me. And you didn't answer my question. I saw you get quiet. They're required for 72 hours.
They're required after the court has determined that they are indigent.
Got it.
And that can be how long? Before they go for a judge, before the judge declares that they're indigent?
4 to 8 weeks before they are set down for a preliminary hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's after the first appearance hearing.
But they have no interaction with a legal attorney until that point.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
And is that everywhere, or just in our jurisdiction?
I can't speak for everywhere.
What about other jurisdictions you're aware of?
Cobb County has an early intervention public defender program, but they are not, they're county run, not state.
Got it.
And so the same for Chatham, the same for Houston. DeKalb is quasi, but they've implemented that portion, and strictly that portion, to address the first appearance, because it cannot be redirected. We're going to pull from there to get attorneys over here in the preliminary sector. And for now, we can let that kind of sit there and then address it on this end, which it never gets addressed on that end. And that is the reason why Cobb County and the other counties that have implemented those versions of that program have been successful in reducing their jail overcrowding, getting our citizens or their citizens the assistance that they need. Because I could tell you about 70% of the defendants in jail now, the underlying issues are not the criminal activity, but drugs and mental health.
Any other questions?
Thank
You're welcome.
All right, please get with Commissioner Hambrick as well, and if you have any additional information you'd like to disseminate to the board, please do so.
Yes, sir.
And we'll discuss further.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, ma'am, for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, with that being said, that was the last presentation, so at this time we stand adjourned. Thank you.